These are live images from southern Israel looking towards the Gaza Strip. A ceasefire between Hamas and Israel is due to come into effect right now. These 7 weeks of fighting have been the deadliest in the history of the Israel-Palestinian conflict. More than 1,200 Israelis were killed in the October 7th terrorist attacks by Hamas. And the Hamas-run health ministry in Gaza says Israel's response has killed nearly 15,000 Palestinians. I'm Hannah Hummel. Welcome to the show. That Qatari-brokered ceasefire is due to last for 4 days, but could be extended. The pause in fighting will allow the exchange of hostages held by Hamas for Palestinian prisoners held in Israeli jails. If all goes to plan, that is expected to take place later today. We'll go live to Jerusalem in a minute, but first let's take a look at this report.
After weeks of waiting, the families of hostages hope their loved ones will come home soon.
I want to hope, I hope that it's going to happen. We've been on such a roller coaster for certainly the past week, but since October 7th, between despair and trauma and hope, I just want to see the children come back.
The Hamas terror group has agreed to release 50 civilian women and children, of which 13 are to be released in the first batch on Friday. In exchange, Israel is set to release 150 Palestinian prisoners, mostly females and teenage males, over the course of the truce. The deal, mediated by Qatar, also includes a 4-day pause in fighting in both the north and south of the Gaza Strip, as well as increased humanitarian aid. Even though the agreement is considered a breakthrough, both sides have remained cautious about saying too much before it materializes.
Based on current circumstances with the start of this truce, our main hope is that this humanitarian truce will give us all the opportunity to look into the bigger task, which is to implement a permanent truce and achieve long-lasting peace.
Efforts are being made to extend the truce beyond the 4-day period. But Israel insists it will resume its military operation in Gaza until it has eradicated Hamas.
International humanitarian aid trucks in Egypt await approval to head towards the Rafah crossing with Gaza. In addition to essentials like food and water, tankers will also be taking in fuel. Egypt said 130,000 litres of diesel and 4 trucks of gas would be delivered daily to Gaza, including 200 trucks of aid. That would boost the aid deliveries that the UN and other aid agencies say are needed in the territory. Hiba Tibi is the country director for the NGO CARE in the Palestinian territories. She told us what the NGO plans to do during this 4-day ceasefire.
We are coordinating with our peer humanitarian organizations, and what we are going to do and focus on is related to health interventions, where we are going to distribute hygiene kits, focus on providing medical services for the refugees in shelters, and especially in the south, continue distributing medical supplies for the hospitals, and of course continue with what we call hygiene kits distribution that are very, very much needed. That has been said, it's not only that is needed. People are waiting. Today in the morning, we all were waiting for the pause, but unfortunately, when it did not happen, I can't tell you what was the impact on people, on my colleagues, for instance, calling us, sending us messages that they really wish for at least one night of proper sleeping.
That was Hiba Tibi, country director for the NGO CARE in Ramallah. Well, let's cross over now to our correspondent Tanya Kramer, who's following the story for us in Jerusalem. Tanya, this is a huge moment that so many people have been waiting for. How are people in Israel feeling now that the ceasefire appears to be imminent and that some of the Israeli hostages kept captive in Gaza could soon be finally returning home?
Well, that's right. I mean, Israeli media are talking about a very emotional day. Of course, we've seen also overnight intensive Israeli shelling on Gaza with more casualties there, but also air raid sirens up to the last moment, up to 7 a.m. here local time. That was expected that, the fighting intensifies before this pause in fighting comes into place. And in Israel, people are now, of course, watching very closely whether this ceasefire, this temporary ceasefire, will hold, but of course all eyes are now on the afternoon. This is when the first hostages are expected to be released. We were told that should happen around 4 p.m. Local time. The families of those first 13 hostages were notified last night. We were told that there's a lot of caution as well, because this is such a fragile truce and such an unprecedented situation as well. I mean, Israelis have seen prisoner swaps and hostage releases before, but not on this scale and not involving children. These are the first hostages that are expected to be released this afternoon. And of course, they're expecting as well that this continues in the coming days. Up to 50 hostages should be released. But there are also mixed feelings, because there are also many other hostages that will remain in Gaza, and it's still unclear how this will play out if and when the fighting will resume.
So many people cautiously hopeful there. What more can you tell us about Israel's agreement to release Palestinian prisoners in return for these hostages?
Well, as we heard in the report before, I mean, there is Israel released a list of 300 Palestinians that are held in Israeli prisons. We understand that some of the names have been approved. We don't know exactly how many of them will be released today, but according to the agreement that was brokered by Qatar, 150 Palestinian prisoners should be released in this first stage. So we understand they will be gathered from different prisons later today. At least the numbers, we don't know how many will be released today, but they will be then brought to checkpoints and then released into the occupied West Bank, where then families will be able to receive them there. They're preparing for this as well. And of course, we also have to talk about Gaza. We understand that, part of this agreement, there's also that more humanitarian aid will go into Gaza, that people will get some respite. But of course, the big question is many of those 1.7 million people that have been displaced in the past 7 weeks, they won't be able to just go home. They are in the south, and it's unclear whether they can go to the north. And many have no home to go to, obviously.
Yeah, so many unknowns there. And the ceasefire is planned to last 4 days, but Israel's military says it's already planning what it says are the next stages of this war. What could these next stages entail?
Well, Israel has made it very clear that this is just a break in fighting, a pause in fighting. And they said the war will resume. There is the possibility of extending this pause in fighting for every 10, as I said, in this agreement, for every 10 hostages that will be released, there might be an extension by 1 day, up to 10 days. We heard the Israeli Defense Minister, Yoav Gallant, saying that he expects another 2 months at least of war, because they want, to eliminate, as they say, dismantle all the capabilities of Hamas, and they haven't yet reached that goal. So this war will continue one way or another. So this is just basically a break and a pause in the fighting.
I'd just like to add that those are live pictures coming to us from Gaza now, as you can see there. Tanya Kramer in Jerusalem, thank you so much for all of your updates.
Well, for more, I have our Middle East analyst Shani Razanis with me here in the studio. Shani, Israel was very much unified in the fight against Hamas, but is it just as unified when it comes now to implementing this ceasefire?
Well, it's not really. We've seen when the cabinet was discussing it, there were voices in the right that are against this. They're saying that it's immoral to leave some of the hostages out while others are going to be released. And there's also the big fear in Israel that this will be actually they're losing momentum and starting again. Their fight is not going to be really possible, and this is de facto the end of the war, where there's still a lot of, as we see, Hamas is strong, Hamas is functioning, Hamas is negotiating with Israel. It's not really anywhere near where Israel wants it to be.
Let's talk about the families of the hostages, because they are an important part of this whole arrangement. They've been putting a lot of pressure on the Israeli government. Are the families of the hostages, are they satisfied that the Israeli government's priorities are in the right place here?
Well, in a way, it's a relief, because there was a lot of fear in the last almost 50 days that they're not being taken seriously enough, that Israel is too occupied with the military offensive. But this is not a happy day in Israel. First of all, there'll only be 13. And even in the end of these days, if we're talking about 50, maybe more, if the ceasefire is extended into 70 or 80, that still leaves Hamas with over 150 people in custody, and in hostages. And these people, many of them are wounded. They're also tearing apart families. We will see mothers and their children, but there are whole families that were taken hostage. The fathers, the men, are left behind. Hamas sees, part of the hardships in the discussion about the deal was, Hamas sees a soldier as any man who ever served in the Israeli military. Doesn't matter if he's now 60 and he's been discharged already 40 years ago. And therefore, bringing these people out is going to be very hard. And this is actually the biggest milestone ahead for Israel and for the Israeli leadership, because these hostages, they've been a sort of a liability on Hamas, the children and the mothers. Talking about the men, the soldiers, that's going to be harder.
There is a lot of international pressure on Israel to come up with some sort of ceasefire, a humanitarian pause in the fighting. We're now here at what is supposed to be a humanitarian pause. It's very early hours. We don't know how this is going to unfold. It's a very delicate ceasefire. How much of a role did that international pressure play in Israel's decision to ultimately go ahead with this?
Major, because Israel feels that it doesn't have too many leverages. It doesn't have too many cards to play. The attack happened on October 7th. Around 240 people were taken hostage. And then Israel was left with, Hamas is setting the conditions on the ground. I mean, Israel feels like it doesn't really have much against Hamas, because it still wants to maintain this and secure the livelihood of those 240 people. This is why they felt that pressuring Hamas through the offensive on the ground and through the siege will be the only way to create some leverage, to create some cards that they can use in order to get some gains in this terrible, tragic situation. It's still probably not going to be enough. The world would like to see more humanitarian aid coming. We have to remember, it's more than humanitarian. These are basic needs, and we're talking about 2 million people, because the whole northern Gaza, most of it is empty. There were over 1 million people who had to flee northern Gaza into the south. And there's also a big question about what's happening now in the north, because there are estimated around 80,000 Palestinians still there. They're not allowed to get any access to this humanitarian aid coming in, and they're not allowed to cross. This is the biggest challenge now for Israel. Hamas has been calling people to cross from the south up to the north during the ceasefire. Israel is trying to fight that and to stop the population from re-immigrating back to the north.
What can you tell us about the negotiations in Qatar that led up to this? Because I'm hearing that there were weeks of negotiations going on in the background. They must have been very intense. Of course, they're secretive. But what happened there? How did we get here?
Well, we know that this deal, in its general scheme, was actually offered already last week. It took some time for the Israeli leadership to be willing to say yes to that. They felt like they need more time for the military operation to run its course. There was always the hope also in Israel that maybe they'll be finding enough leads, that soldiers on the ground going into the tunnels, going into Gaza, will find enough leads to bring home some hostages without the need for a deal with Hamas. That failed, and eventually the Israelis have decided that they need to save as many as they can, as long as they can. The Qataris have been running and forth. The Americans have put a lot of pressure. We've seen yesterday a bit of a stall And Qatar there felt like it's putting its own reputation on the line, and it was pushing very strong for Hamas to not back off. And it's still a very gentle, very delicate situation. Everybody is, watching the other side very carefully. Many things can still go wrong. And I wouldn't count on this to only last 4 days. It's probably, and Israel is saying that, Israel is calculating, Hamas will try to stall, will try to say, wait, we need more time, and so on.
But as you say, this is a delicate ceasefire. We're just in the first hour of it,
Correct.
really. We'd have to wait for it to really fully take effect and see if there's anyone who's going to spoil it, because there have been a lot of warnings about that as well.
But we seem to be in a rare moment where both Hamas and Israel seem to feel that they can benefit from some time off. Israel, before initiating its operation on the southern part of the Strip, and Hamas, of course, for the need to recover, recoup, and so on. And also, again, there's some sort of an estimation that having those families, those young kids, elderly women in custody, hostages in Gaza, was actually a liability for Hamas.
OK, we'll have to leave it there. Shani, thank you very much. That was a Middle East analyst, Shani Rosales. You are watching DW News. Of course, we're covering the beginning of what is supposed to be a 4-day ceasefire in Israel. In Gaza, international humanitarian aid trucks in Egypt are now waiting for the green light to head through the Rafah crossing into Gaza. In addition to essentials like food and water, tankers will also be bringing fuel. These live images from the Rafah border crossing show those aid trucks lined up there at the border. Egypt says that 130,000 liters of diesel and 4 trucks of gas will be delivered daily into Gaza, including 200 trucks of aid. That would boost the aid deliveries that the UN and other aid agencies say are needed in the territory. Journalist Hazem Balusha was in Gaza until recently. He joins us now from Jordan's capital, Amman. Tell us, what will the ceasefire mean for the people of Gaza?
It means a lot. It means for people to check their places, to be released from the pressure from ongoing bombardment that lasted for 48 days. Many people, huge number of displaced people, not only from the north to the south, even from the southern areas, from eastern border, or even for those who are remaining in Gaza City and the north to check their places, and for medical staff to remove some of the bodies still remain under the rubble in Gaza City or other places in Gaza Strip, as long as for the aid to come in to get some help. People can try to find some other places to move. They were under pressure of moving in the previous days.
Now, those aid trucks, again, we're looking at pictures at the Rafah border crossing. They're lined up, waiting to bring that aid in. Hundreds of trucks, I understand, are supposed to be able to enter during the truce. What do people in Gaza need most right now, Hazem?
People need first food, water, and, of course, fuel for running the facilities. The food was very limited, and there was a huge shortage of food, not only for aid that delivered or distributed to the shelters. All kind of food food is missing in Gaza Strip. I talk to people there, but from my family or friends or ordinary people I'm trying to reach. They tell me that most of the supermarkets are empty, shelves are not, nothing on them. Many, drinking water is hard to get. So these are the main thing they need from the aid or the deliveries that would expect to come to Gaza.
Now, Israel says it will halt the movement of military vehicles on the main Gaza highway, that north to south highway. They're going to halt those military vehicles so people can travel south, can use that road to walk to the south, presumably. Do you think Gazans who haven't already left the north for the south will do so now?
It depends, actually. I saw many footages from the morning. Still, some people are trying to head north from the south. Not a huge number yet, but some people, of course, were waiting for this pose to be able to move from north to the south. It's not easy mission for many people, for old people to walk that long. There is no transportation available in the city. Many people were told like they have no places to go, and the situation in the south is not that safe or proper for them to move. So that made them to stay in Gaza despite of the danger that they're exposed to. I'm sure many people would move from north to south, but still some people will try to go from south to the north.
As you're speaking, Hazem, we're looking at some live pictures. I'm told that they are from the Khan Yunis hospital inside Gaza. So, Hazem, the release of detainees from Israeli jails is also part of this deal. How important is that for the Palestinians?
It's very, I mean, the prisoners issue and the detainees is very essential issue for the Palestinians, whether in Gaza Strip or the West Bank. The majority of the prisoners are from West Bank cities. And today we are expecting, according to the reports, 39 detainees will be released to the West Bank cities. Always the factions and ordinary people talk about this essential issue to be solved, and they are willing to see their beloved people released and freed from the prisons.
Are there hopes, Hazem, among the Palestinians that this temporary ceasefire will become permanent?
This is the main hope. Everybody I talk to, all the comments on social media that I have read, they are hoping that this will hold first, and it's not limited to 4 days, which is not enough for them after devastating and hard time that experience for 48 days, that they need this war to stop, and they are looking for a complete ceasefire and to be able to return their house or to bury the beloved people bodies who were still under the rubble. Many people are talking about this, and they are willing for this, and they think this 4-day pause is not enough for that.
Hazem, thank you very much for talking with us again. That was journalist Hazem Balusha in Amman, Jordan.
Thank you.